Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What is going on, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my sapient co-host, Chris Rasick. Today, we have a very special guest, Corey Ganem. That is at Ganem Corey on Twitter. Corey's been around for a while. I believe like 2017 is around the time him and I first ever chatted. But now he focuses mainly on wholesale. He's a great follow on Twitter, drops a bunch of wholesale-focused Amazon knowledge, and recently he dropped about $50,000 in purchase orders over at the ASD show. And for those that are uninitiated, that stands for the Affordable Shopping Destination Trade Show, which is in Las Vegas twice a year, except for those COVID years when they kind of did a road show around the country in places that were open. Now, our plan today is to get him to spill as many processes, strategies, and secrets that we can get out of him over the next 45 to 60 minutes. But before we dive in, you know that this show's not free. We don't hide the show behind a paywall, but that doesn't mean the content comes to you absolutely for nothing. If you find some value in the show, please do us the equivalent of a digital handshake. Hit the follow button on your favorite podcast player or head over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button. And I wouldn't hate it if you shared a screenshot of an episode that's been helpful to you in your favorite FBA group or on any social media channel that you post on either. Seeing the podcast rise in the charts and the number of subs go up on YouTube gives Chris and I enough of a dopamine high that we come back and record even more for you guys. So honor that agreement, and we'll keep coming back and bringing you guys as much content as we can. But now, let's welcome Corey to the show. Corey, I appreciate you taking the time to come talk shop with us, man.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm looking to give you guys as much information as I can here in the next hour or so.
Awesome. Well, I always like to lob a softball question right out of the gate. So who's your best supplier? But no,
I do get asked that quite a bit on Twitter, actually. You'd be surprised.
I
can never tell if people are joking or if they're serious.
I am always surprised when people have the guts to ask that question, but kudos to them.
Right.
No, but I do want to set the stage a little bit. So I am going to ask, what do you see your estimated annual sales for 2023? What do you expect them to be? And then could you give us a little bit of a brief background about how you got started on Amazon and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so as far as projected sales for this year, so last year, 2022, we were I think just over 4.3 million. So the goal this year is to hit 5 million. And so while that wouldn't be really a massive increase from, I guess, a percentage standpoint, we're just focused on 5 million, but at a much higher margin than we did 4.3 million at last year. So really more so focused on the margin. If we do less than 5, I don't care as long as we hit our margin goal. So that's the goal for the year. And now as far as how I got, it was the second question, how I got into Amazon, like kind of how I got started.
Yeah. What brought you to the platform, and I guess what kept you here?
Yeah, so what brought me to the platform was Breezy Resell. So I'm sure, I know you two are familiar with him. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast are familiar with him. And it actually started when I stumbled upon a video of his. This was back in early 2017. It was actually January 2017. He was talking about the Gary Vee's 2017 Flip Challenge, which was pretty popular at the time, just talking about buying stuff, garage sales, yard sales, flipping them on eBay, taking the profit, and really just having that as spending money. And one of his videos in particular was him going to Marshall's, scanning stuff, and then flipping it on Amazon, which, as we all know now, is referred to as retail arbitrage. So that really piqued my curiosity. That's the model that I went with to start. Shortly after, I had moved to Chicago, and so I didn't have a car to be going around a retail store. So I was pretty much forced to do online arbitrage if I wanted to continue. And did that, started using tactical arbitrage. And then January of 2019, Stumbled upon one of Larry Labarsky, Watch Me Amazon's YouTube videos talking about wholesale and really the compounding opportunity that business model presents. And January 2019, we pretty much burned the OA boats, went 100% wholesale, and then have been ever since.
Awesome. I love that. Reezy Reezy has brought a lot of people to the platform, I think.
So many. Oh yeah.
And he's a really good hang. I got to hang out with him in Miami, and we talked about a bunch of stuff. And the guy knows so much, not only about reselling, but about social media and YouTube and how to properly use it. I just sat there and listened for like 2 hours. It was great. I'm gonna get him on the show here soon, I hope.
Yeah, he's got a ton of information. I got to hang out with him a lot too, and it was cool because when I found him, I want to say he was 5K subs, maybe even less than that. And so I feel like I've truly been with him from the start. So it was cool to kind of meet him. I guess when you did, like 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah.
he was super down to earth, super nice guy.
Yeah. So since we're primarily an arbitrage focused show, Chris will say this quite often. He's an eternal test buyer. We preach shallow and wide over going super deep all the time and protecting the downside. So can you share a little bit about what wholesale looks like, without giving away any trade secrets or anything?
Yeah, so I guess from just a business model perspective, wholesale and arbitrage are very similar, right? I mean, you're going into a supplier catalog where on the OA side, that might just be a regular retail website. On the wholesale side, that's going to be a legitimate supplier, either price list or usually dealer portal or website. And you're looking for opportunities where products that they're offering are selling well on Amazon, but there's an arbitrage opportunity between the price that you can buy it for and the price that you can sell it for. So really that's what we're looking for. And it is the same at the end of the day across those models. Now the difference, and I think this is one of the, if not the primary advantage of wholesale versus OA, the primary difference is that in the wholesale model, you're buying from legitimate distributors or oftentimes from the manufacturer themselves. And if you place an order for, let's say, 1,000 units, they're going to come back to you and say, hey, do you want 1,000 more? Or how about this product? Have you looked at this? They're going to try to get you to buy more from them, really as much as you possibly can. Whereas when you're doing OA, a lot of times when you're going to these stores, like specifically, I know Target's not reseller friendly. I believe Kohl's is not reseller friendly. Like a lot of the companies you're buying from are not wanting you to buy more, right? It's like you're trying to buy 100 units, you want to buy 1,000, and they're either not letting you, or you're having to go to another retail store to source that same product. So really wholesale can kind of centralize your sourcing, and it also gives you that opportunity component as well. The relationship component as well, where with OA you don't really have a relationship with your sources. You're more or less a faceless customer. And whereas with wholesale, the better the relationship you have with your suppliers, the better your pricing, the better your discounts, the better your terms, really the easier your life is going to be all around.
Nice. I like that. Before we move on to the next question, can you help me dispel the myth that you've got to have, 5 or even 6 figures to start wholesale sourcing and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. And so that is definitely a misconception that a lot of folks have. And I actually caught some heat on Twitter a few weeks ago because I tweeted something along the lines of, you can get started in wholesale with as little as $500. Now, that's definitely not ideal. If I just had $500, I would start with retail arbitrage or online arbitrage. However, it's still very much possible to start wholesale with a small amount of money, because a lot of suppliers, not all, but there are some out there that either have no minimum order or they have a minimum order of, say, $100, and they might have free shipping at, say, $100 as well. So it's not impossible to say that you can go out there with $500, find a supplier with a low minimum order, find a couple of profitable products, get your feet wet that way, and snowball your money that way. And as you snowball that money, you can branch out into suppliers that have maybe higher minimums or are more exclusive with who they work with. And it's totally possible to start out that way.
Awesome.
Nice. Hey, Corey, so aside from looking for any excuse to go to Las Vegas that I can possibly find, can you give us a breakdown of what ASD is for those that may have are only first hearing about it today?
Yeah, definitely. So ASD is one of the largest B2B wholesale trade shows in the world, I believe. And so it's twice a year. It's in Las Vegas, and it's at the Las Vegas Convention Center. There's one in February, which is the one we just went to, and then there's one in August and I believe it's those 2 months every year. And so it's called ASD Market Week, and what it is a lot of different vendors, primarily in the the closeout category, as far as they carry closeouts primarily, a lot of beauty and fashion type distributors, so just a lot of cosmetics wholesalers, a lot of perfumes wholesalers, those types of companies. And then there's a lot of call them maybe smoke shop type distributors where they carry tobacco products, they carry vaping products and accessories for those types of products as well. And so there's definitely more types of suppliers that come to ASD, but I'd say that's the three primary categories that they'll fall into. And then each hall, so the North Hall, the Central Hall, and the West Hall is organized by supplier type. So, and I didn't realize this till the end of the show so we were spending the majority of our time in the West Hall, which was a lot of the toy kind of closeout distributors, more of the general type closeout distributors. And we made some great relationships there, but we didn't spend enough time in the North Hall, which was all the cosmetics and beauty guys, and I know some people that went there and cleaned up, made some great contacts. So bottom line, ASD is just a great place to meet new suppliers and also network with other sellers that are there to build their business with the suppliers that fall into those categories.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, ASD is where Snoop debuted his smoking accessories and stuff. So
It wouldn't surprise me. It's in fact so I believe, let's see, I think it was the Central Hall was all the those types of kind of the smoke shop type of suppliers. And so we actually never even made it to the Central Hall. I mean, there was so much opportunity in the other two halls, we just didn't even make it. However, a couple of our suppliers fall into that category and were there. We didn't even know it. So I was kind of kicking myself that I had the opportunity to meet a couple of the reps that I've worked with and didn't even really realize they were there.
Oh, that's crazy. So
are there more snack tables? Are there more snack tables in the smoking?
I would have to think that there would be. It would only make sense. So
it'd be good planning, I think.
The concession receipts are definitely double in that hall. Just a little aside, I happen to have a friend who owns a couple of smoke shops back in Ohio, and he gave me a peek at his books, and I was flabbergasted at the profits that he's pulling from physical retail locations running a smoke shop.
I'm sure their margins are really good.
Oh yeah, and I won't say his name, so he won't get in trouble. He's like, a lot of this is in cash, and you can kind of take that for whatever you want out of that. So now we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what I think may be the best story that you have out of ASD. I know that you asked for a few minutes of time with the CEO of a distributor that had a large yellow sign that said no Amazon sellers. And of course, that is what people are afraid of. They're afraid of rejection, of course. And everyone likes to use the excuse that, well, distributors don't want to deal with Amazon sellers. So how did your conversation go? What did you say? And how did that work out when you spoke with that CEO?
Yeah, definitely. I can get into that. And so just funny, quick side note too. So at ASD, when you register for the show and you get your badge, at the bottom of your badge in big orange, neon print is the type of company you registered as. So if you registered as a distributor, it says distributor, retailer. And so I had my admin VA sign us up for the show. And I guess he chose Amazon seller as an option. And so I guess he chose that option, not knowing that ideally we wanted to register as a retailer. So we get to ASD, we get our badges printed out. Literally at the bottom of the badge in bright neon orange, it says Amazon seller. So I'm like, all right, well, first of all, we can't have this. So my cousin and I borrowed a pair of scissors because he was going with me. We cut that off because, our thoughts were if we're approaching suppliers, they're automatically going to discount anything we say just as soon as they look at our badge. So that was really the first thing that we did when we got there. But this particular CEO, so he was standing at his booth, didn't even know he was the CEO, thought he was just a regular sales rep that was standing there. And honestly, I didn't even see the no Amazon seller sign either It wasn't until we were walking away from the booth after we talked to the guy for about 20 minutes that my cousin said, "Hey, did you notice that sign right there?" I was like, "Oh, I actually didn't at all." Honestly, if I did, I might, who knows if I would have said the same thing. But we just walked up to the guy, we were just talking to him. I noticed the reason we talked to him in the first place is I noticed he was carrying a brand that we had sold in the past, which is Taser, right? Like, think of just like a taser that you use. Mm-hmm. And so, they were reselling that brand. I was talking to him about that brand. And then I just like a lot of the ASD guys, like they don't shy away from the Amazon conversation. Like they're not going to give you a hard time about it if you're confident about it. And usually if you lead with it, so like that's a lot of times I'll lead with it. I say, hey, we've been doing a lot of business on Amazon. What's your strategy as far as that channel is concerned? Just asking just like an open-ended question like that. And he was like, oh, well, now that you mention it, so Taser in particular, they just signed an exclusive with a third party, so can't really sell that to you. But he's like, I don't know, like on our end, like we've got a couple of brands that we own in-house, and right now he said it was like one of their employees' cousins or something was running the PPC, which, I mean, I'm sure we've seen that situation a million times before where they think it's going okay, but they don't really know. So, they feel like there's opportunity on the table as far as Amazon's concerned with their private label brands, but again, they just don't know what they don't know. And he told me that right now I believe it was the three brands combined their in-house brands are doing about 170K total a month on Amazon. And they've got a couple of products I looked into them that are doing really well. And so, I mean, it wasn't even, I didn't pitch him or anything. It was really just, like I said, asking questions, trying to understand what their goals are. And also, like I even said a few times, like, listen, I don't care if you work with us. It doesn't matter who you work with. The bottom line is you guys need to be educated on some of the things that you can do on Amazon that you haven't done to help, to possibly increase conversion, drive more traffic, whatever. So my offer to him was pretty much like, hey, next week, let's just jump on a Zoom. Let me give you a couple of pointers on what I think you could do just from a quick glance at your listings, and just, I literally told him, like, take that information back to your Amazon guy and have him implement it. I don't care. If you want to work with us, I'm open to the conversation, but it's not something that I was trying to push in any way. And I think because I was more kind of like relaxed about it, he was very open to it, and he's already gotten back to me, and we're going to get a call in the books for this coming week. So he did at one point mention that they have a couple of new SKUs that they're looking to launch on Amazon first. And so he more or less offered us the opportunity. He was like, what would that look like if we had you launch a new SKU for us exclusively, and et cetera, et cetera. So bottom line is it went from a big neon no Amazon seller sign to him more or less pitching us on potentially launching a new SKU for them exclusively. So again, it just came down to being open about what we're doing, asking questions, and just genuinely trying to get a feel for like what he's trying to accomplish and how we can help.
That's awesome. So just in case anybody missed it, I kind of want to pull two takeaways out of just that story. Number one, you dropped a brand name. You dropped Taser brand. And if anybody doesn't know, that's a self-defense brand. It tases the heck out of somebody. Those are the best episodes of Cops, by the way, when people get tased. So that is probably not a brand that I think, or even a category that I think a lot of sellers would look into.
Definitely not.
Maybe some fear of, being called up in a lawsuit or whatever it might be. And so there's one takeaway. Look in the niches that other people are probably going to maybe shy away from for one reason or another. Matter of fact, that's the same niche that my first private label foray was in. It was a self-defense niche before Amazon took that away, unfortunately. But the other one that you said is you really did what you kind of do on Twitter in real life. You offered value up front without expecting anything in return. And then, the scale kinds of balances itself out. And in your situation, it just happened a little bit faster than it may happen for other people. But I think that when Amazon sellers want to switch from OA and RA to wholesale, that a mindset shift needs to happen. When it comes to RA and OA, we are just trying to look for any opportunities that we can use to get some leverage to arbitrage.
Right.
And maybe that's, using as many coupons as we can or discount gift cards or whatever. But the switch to wholesale, it is a relationship game. And
100%.
relationships look totally different than just going ham on as cheap a product as you can. So,
Definitely.
yeah, hopefully everyone took that away.
And that's something that I actually preach to, especially to a lot of people. Like I've had friends come to me over the years that they've got corporate jobs, or they're interested in Amazon in some way, and so they want advice on what to do and kind of what path to take. And anybody that I talk to that's a sales guy, that's in a sales role, or that in any way, shape, or form is inclined towards sales, I always push towards wholesale, because I mean, that's all it is at the end of the day. Like if you've been in a B2B sales position before and you've done well, then you can absolutely crush it in wholesale, because that's what it is you're making relationships with vendors, and you're using those relationships as your moat in the business, right? Like there's some of our suppliers, like I would give them to anybody. I'm like, call these people up, go ahead, because I know that one, they're either not going to do business with you, period, or two, you're not going to be able to get the kind of pricing that we can get due to the fact that we've been working with them for X number of years, and I know the guy's family, and he calls me on the weekends or whatever. Like there's just a lot of things you can do to create that moat around yourself that really, again, is more in like the relationship category than anything.
Love that.
Interesting. I'd like to hit the rewind button a little bit, and if you could put yourself in the shoes of someone going to ASD for the very first time. Kind of a two-part question. We'll talk pre-show and post-show. Pre-show, tell them should be their approach, their mindset, strategy, and then and even specifically like walking through the halls and stuff. And then the second part would be, in your opinion, what would a successful ASD look like as they're boarding the plane for a beginner?
Yeah, good question. So really it comes down to like what do you do pre-show, and then what does success look like post-show?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So pre-show, I would do what we did, but I would take it a step further. So pre-show, we made a short list of all the vendors that we thought looked promising just based on their website and their description on ASD's website. And so we did that. We made that list thinking that we were going to pretty more or less go down that list, booth by booth, and visit everybody that way. And turns out when we got there, we actually had a lot more luck, literally just starting at one end of the room and pretty much going down the lines, right? Because there's just so many suppliers that don't make it on that short list for whatever reason. Either they didn't have a slot on ASD's website, or they weren't on your radar for some reason. So it's like that short list is good because you want to reach out to all of those vendors pre-show, right? So like what you want to do 100% pre-show, if you don't do anything else, is make a list of, even if you don't go through every vendor in the catalog, pull out like 40 or 50 good vendors from the exhibitor list, reach out to every single one of them multiple times, because most of them won't answer the first time. And the pitch, it's not even a pitch, but just the pitch is just like, hey, I'm going to ASD next week, or not next week. You should do this a few weeks before you go. But hey, I'm going to ASD in a few weeks. I know you're going to ASD in a few weeks. Basically your goal is to try to get an account opened and get some pricing before you get there. Because if you can do that, a lot of that legwork up front before you get there, then on show day, you already know what their pricing is. Like you can have some products in hand that you're ready to purchase with them. And because you're at the show and you're meeting them face to face, and they're there to make more sales than normal, so they're offering bigger discounts than normal, then typically you can usually get a better pricing on that order at the show. And two, it's like, hey, we just started working together 2-3 weeks ago. Now we're meeting face to face. I mean, that's going to put you at the front of the line compared to anybody else that they've not met face to face, that they work with. So in summary, pre-show is, reach out to as many of these companies in advance as you can, set up accounts, get pricing, and then everyone that you got in touch with before the show, make a point to meet with at the show. Because and if you just do that right there, I mean, that in and of itself would make the show worth it. But as far as knowing that, okay, I'm getting on the show, I'm getting on the plane, I'm leaving Vegas, what makes this a successful show? And I'd say, in my opinion, it's really just trying to have making sure like you've had as many quality conversations as you can. So like when it comes to the show itself, so like I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't on the show floor like 8 hours a day every day. I just wasn't. Like we were on the floor for a few hours per day max. And I was telling this to my cousin when we were there. I'm like, listen, we're not going to be here all day. We're going to be here a few hours each day, so let's maximize it. And maximizing it, in my opinion, looks like having 15 quality conversations with new suppliers per day. And that went for each of us. Like the first day we were kind of together, he was more or less learning from me and we were together. The next day we divided and conquered, and I said, if we're going to be here for, let's say, 3 hours, let's get 15 solid new business cards each. And so we did exactly that. And if we're there for 3 days, then the goal was to personally talk to 45 new suppliers total while we were there. And I think I was closer to like between 50 and 60. And so that to me looked like success.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's a great tip on the pre-show, because that's a warm introduction. If you sent the
Well, it
email
is, and I'll tell you, that's the reason I'm going to be preaching that forever is because there was so we did that. We had a short list of like 60 or 70 companies. I'll be honest, I got kind of lazy. I only reached out to like 10 of those pre-show, but of that 10, we opened accounts with a few. But one of those 10, we ended up ordering from. I think we ordered from him twice before we even went to ASD. Met the guy at ASD. Sat down with him, got to meet him, just chop it up in person, did another order at ASD, and just has become pretty quickly, I can tell, like going to be one of our bigger accounts. So, and again, that just came from like that pre-show reach out. So if you just do that alone could be worth it.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I'm gonna turn this just a little bit negative for a moment. This question kind of comes from Twitter. There always seems to be this cycle of what's popular in the Amazon space. OA is really popular. Everyone should do OA, and then everyone should do PL. And we're in a cycle right now where, at least on Twitter and maybe even Instagram, wholesale is on everyone's lips. And so what one person is curious about is, do you think that ambitious beginners who are maybe rushing into wholesale are going to maybe irritate account managers at easier to find wholesale companies and maybe cause some more walls or gates to be thrown up for those who are, actually going to do this long term?
So do I think beginners are more or less going to spoil it for people that are here for the long term, or at least start to spoil it? Yeah. So, I mean, I personally don't think that that's a big issue. I mean, I get that wholesale might be trendy right now and maybe a lot of more folks are jumping into it than would have previously. But I mean, just like any business that comes into popularity at some point or another, it's like there's going to be a handful of people that are doing it at a high level. So for them, it's never really going to be, those beginners are never necessarily going to affect them. And then you've got the people that are trying to do it at a high level and that are trying to grow their businesses. And I could see those folks maybe causing some issues for them. But at the end of the day, if you're in it for the long term, then you're going to be able to establish yourself in a niche. You're going to be able to differentiate yourself from those people that are more or less fair weather sellers, that are starting up recently. Because, I mean, these distributors and these sales reps, like, they're not dumb. They can typically tell who has been around the block and who is completely new. So again, if your heart's in the right place and if you're here for the long term, then I don't see that being really a big issue for you, as long as you continue to pivot, innovate, differentiate yourself, and really position yourself in a good light when approaching these suppliers.
Yeah. Now, I do want to, now that you've answered that, I do want to kind of throw a little something out there about this. And Chris and I sort of discussed this a little bit earlier when we were messaging. I find that it's a good question, but I also find it a little funny because what I'm seeing now, 11, 12 years into this game is kind of the same irritants popping up again. 6, 7 years ago, there was one particular course that everyone was mad at because, my supplier got 100 emails and it was all the same. And
I think I know which one you're talking about.
I'm sure you probably do, and And I'm like, well, but there's going to be 1% of the people who, actually land the accounts and still, are growing and stuff like that. So,
Right.
yeah, I certainly understand where the question comes from. I'm finding it funny that I'm seeing these same things cycle back through yet again.
Exactly. Well, and I actually answered this question. Somebody asked me this the same question the other day, but more they were more so asking about, what will if I find this distributor in my area, won't other people have found them, and therefore won't they be too saturated? And my point was, listen, the chances of somebody looking for that exact supplier and that exact category and that exact niche in your exact area, one, the chances of that even happening in the first place are small. But let's say that it does happen. And let's say 5 people have that same supplier as you. Well, did those other 5 people also take the time to follow up the 2, 3, 6, 7 times that it might take to get that account open in the first place? Probably not, but let's say they did. Well, then did those same 5 people scan the 10,000 SKU catalog both manually and with the scanner that most people aren't going to do? Probably not. So like when you look at it that way, you could have the same supplier as 100 other people, but if those 100 other people aren't actively analyzing every product that supplier has to offer every day, then there's always going to be products that slip through the cracks, and there's always going to be opportunity.
Hey guys, wanted to take a quick second and thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that kind of mirrors what we talk about with arbitrage. Because so think about the person asking that question. So other people are going to be talking to these, potential wholesale accounts. So, it kind of implies so I'm not even going to bother. So what are you going to do? You're going to do arbitrage instead? Because do you think other sellers haven't walked through the aisles that you're going to do?
Right.
You're going to walk through if you're doing retail arbitrage. Do you think you're going to find a corner of Walmart.com that is unexplored? You're not.
Exactly.
So it's similar. It kind of mirrors each other. And it even with arbitrage, it's like, are you going to go the extra step and actually manually type something in instead of just scanning a barcode? It's
Right.
I love this is the quote we should have used last week, Chris, but there was a great quote. It says, "The extra mile is never crowded."
Yep.
I thought, and it's absolutely true, and it's it's good advice in both formats. So
Totally.
Before you ask the next question, that kind of reminds me when I was doing a fair amount of retail arbitrage, and I would be in a TJ Maxx, a Ross, a Marshalls, or whatever. Some of the best products that I ever sold, I know that a reseller had been there first because the stickers were already pulled back on the barcodes. But I took the time to find the 2-pack, find the 3-pack, and then I would clear a shelf of something I know someone else just totally was like, oh, this isn't profitable.
Right, because you probably title searched it, and you didn't just say, "Oh, the no UPC match. This one must not be good," and then move on to the next. And actually, I had somebody today, I think, DM me on Twitter and ask what I thought was a really good question. They said, "Hey, of all your inventory, what percentage was found via using a scanning tool like Analyzer.tools, and then what percentage was found via actual one-on-one manual reverse sourcing?" And while we don't have that, we don't track that metric. One, I think it would be something interesting to track, but two, I'd say 95% of our inventory was sourced manually via not using a scanner. We still have a scanner. We use it when it's like a 10,000 SKU list, but my VAs know that our rule basically is if you use a scanner, you can use the scanner, but you have to go back through manually and source it line by line, even if it's a 10,000 row Excel sheet and it takes you the next week and a half. That's what we do. So that's how you find all the best products.
Absolutely.
yeah. So we you talked about scouting the show beforehand, and then while you're at the show, the question applies to both scenarios. Like, how do you choose a supplier to read what boxes are checked that makes you say, okay, this is a go?
Yeah. So you mean as far as like in the trade show context?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, we keep our criteria pretty simple when deciding who to reach out to, like when looking at people on trade show lists. So pretty much it comes to, are they a brand, or are they a distributor? And so if they're the brand themselves, then the question is, are their products already listed on Amazon and are they selling well? And if the answer is yes, then we're going to put them on our list. Now, typically, ideally, they're either being sold through other third parties or through the brand themselves. But if they're selling directly to Amazon first party, then I mean, it's not a deal breaker, right? Because a lot of people want to get away from that. So that makes them a good target. So on the brand side, like I said, if they check those boxes, then we'll put them on our list and we'll talk to them. On the distributor side, if they carry brands that are selling well on Amazon, then we're going to talk to them. Like pretty much simple as that, because we don't know what their pricing is going to be, right? As long as we know that, hey, they carry products that are, there's at least demand for what they're carrying, right? We could sell it if we could get a good price. Then it just comes down to pricing, and then that's just the conversation from there.
Nice.
When you go to a trade show, whether it's ASD or Sweet and Snacks or whatever show you're going to go to, and you know that, well, like, you may not have gone into ASD saying, okay, I want to drop this kind of money at the show. But how important are show specials when you go and make a purchase?
Yeah, so they're definitely important. And so this is something I learned, because honestly, ASD was only my second show, but I mean, I think I learned a ton from it. And what I learned going into it next time is that, so ASD at least it's a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday show. So it's literally like 5 days long. Now, the Saturday, the first day is like the VIP buyer event. From what I was told, I believe I think you need an invite to come on Saturday, and you have to be invited by a vendor. And I was told this is when like the big buyers come. So like Goodwill is there buying. Somebody said like Walmart. Like, so that's Saturday is when all the big guys go in and place big orders. And so from what I understand is like the deals are so good on Saturday that you want to be at the door at 9 a.m. on Saturday placing orders as soon as possible. And that's how you're going to get the best deals. I didn't show up until Sunday afternoon, and we still found some good deals, but I guarantee you we missed like 80% of what was there. Mm-hmm. So, sorry, remind me the question. I got off on a little tangent there.
Oh yeah, no problem. No, I just wonder how important are show specials when you make.
Oh, the show specials. Yeah. So the distributor's almost always going to have better pricing at the show. They're there at the show to sell more, to make, to do deals and bring on new customers. So, but a lot of the times show pricing is still good for either like the week after the show or the whole month after the show. I think it's pretty much going to be supplier specific, but it definitely helps to write orders at the show because of availability, because a lot of stuff's going to get sold out from under you. But as far as the pricing that you get at the show, you can typically, like I said, you can get that pricing for at least the next few days or the next few weeks. And so in that case, like if what you want to buy is sold out, it's not as important to place it at the show because you can still get the pricing for the next few weeks.
Very cool.
So I know you told us a little bit about the conversation that you had with the CEO of the No Amazon Seller, but like what tips would you give for the people that didn't respond to your pre-show emails, or a booth that you walk up on with no prep? What advice can you give for kind of a cold open or a cold call, and any tips on how you try to steer those conversations to your benefit?
Yeah, and so I'll just talk, I guess, in the trade show context again, just because I'm fresh off of it. So really my strategy for just initiating the conversation with any vendor at ASD was to just walk up to their booth, because every booth they're gonna have their products displayed. If they're a distributor, they're gonna have the brands they carry laid out. If they're the brand, they're gonna have a ton of their stuff laid out. So really I just go up to their stuff and just start touching it. Like I just start showing a genuine interest in what they carry. And so like if it's a distributor, it's cosmetics, well, I'm just looking at stuff and I'm making comments to myself like, oh yeah, like we've carried that before, and just really just waiting until somebody from the supplier like walks up to you and talks to you. And then from there, it's more so, hey, either we carried this before, this is a good product, or like in the case of the CEO where there's a lot of self-defense stuff. And yeah, we had carried Taser before, but I really didn't know anything about his stuff. I'm like, hey, just, tell me about this product right here. It's really cool. And like a lot of these reps, or, a lot of the people you're talking to are the owners, and they're super passionate about the products, and they'll just go off on it. And so I just, let them talk. And then to try to bring it back to the Amazon conversation and like how we can work with them, I always just ask like, hey, do you guys have a strategy when it comes to Amazon? And typically if we're talking to a brand, then they're going to go out, they're just going to start talking like, oh yeah, we've got that handled, or, oh, that's been a nightmare, let me tell you about it. And then those kind of conversations are the best, because then you just shut up and let them talk, and then try to, ask more questions to really establish your credibility there. So it's more so just asking questions, getting a feel for what's their goal. What is their temperature as far as Amazon? Are they like that guy where they don't want to hear anything about it? Or are they open to it, but they're a little hesitant, so you kind of got to hold their hand. It's more so at the end of the day, just positioning yourself as the expert and asking questions that like, that their answers are going to lead them to wanting to work with you ideally.
Nice. I like that. I've got a little bit of a side question here.
Mm-hmm.
Have you personally ever been in sales, or have you taken any sales training? Because I'm hearing a lot of things, that I may have heard, like a Dale Carnegie course that I took, when I was selling insurance and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, so that was my first job out of college. Well, I guess even before college, like in college, I always went door to door every summer selling just pressure washing services. That was just like a business I'd done during the summer with myself and a couple of buddies usually. So like that door to door sales experience definitely helped. My first job out of college was in B2B tech sales. So I was working for IBM selling data storage for 2 years. And so the sales training that they put us through, which was like the first year and a half of my 2-year career, that was all sales training. And like it was pretty well regarded, I think, as like one of the better corporate sales training programs around. And so, I mean, that for sure was very beneficial. And just having made like thousands of cold calls and just all kinds of sales over the years, that's kind of like what's fed into it.
Awesome. I knew you had to have some sort of sales background.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is one of the questions that probably comes up a lot when it comes to wholesale, and you kind of already touched on it, that you're working on increasing your margins this year, which probably one of the better answers I've heard from a guest on the podcast. Everyone wants to increase sales. You don't often hear people say, oh, well, yeah, increasing sales would be great, but I would prefer to increase margins. So
Yeah.
in the wholesale game, are the margins slimmer, in general compared to RA, OA? And if someone wanted to move from the RA, OA world to wholesale, I guess what kind of margin should they set their target on?
Yeah, so I guess to answer the first question, like in general, are the margins a little slimmer? I mean, I'd say in general, yes, but that's not to say that, like, we have plenty of SKUs where our margin is 25, 30%, and they sell at a decent volume too. So I think it's just like OA and RA, where you've got your lower volume, or sorry, your lower, well, I guess your lower volume, higher profit products, and maybe you only sell a few a month, but they're super profitable. And then on the other side, you've got your higher volume, lower margin products where you don't make a killing, but you're flipping them left and right. Well, wholesale is the same thing. So, but I'd say in general, the margins probably skew a little on the lower end because of the fact that you're able to buy thousands of units at a time. And so because you have access to that scale, sometimes you are willing to take a little lower margin for that volume. But let's see, you're saying like margins to expect, I guess, in the wholesale business. Is that the second part of the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like if you can get around an 18% gross margin in wholesale, like at scale, then that's solid. That's pretty solid in my opinion. I mean, I know for us, we're shooting for 20% gross this year, and that's going to be pretty hard to hit. I mean, that's like essentially a stretch goal. Like if we can gross 20%, then fully remote, then I think we're doing really good. But really the goal is to shoot for 20 and land around 18. So 18% gross is pretty solid. I mean, if you're netting 10%, then that's a solid wholesale business. If you're netting any more than 10%, then that's really good. And I'd say less than 10%, and you can probably tighten things up here or there to get to around 10%, which is where you want to be net. And that's before taxes.
Yeah. I think that's solid. That's a solid number. I know that a lot of the naysayers, a lot of the people will be like, oh, well, those numbers, don't make sense. But I know that you're never going to scale to the size of a Walmart or a Target, but Walmart and Target run at 2 and 3% respectively.
Right.
And that's our competition. We're retailers just like them, even though we're not at their scale. So being able to run at 10% margins is really pretty solid. And I think people should maybe manage their expectations properly when, thinking about this kind of business, especially now that it's much more mature than it was when, I got started. So.
Yeah. And I feel like it's the same people that are expecting to have really good margins. It's those same people that are on tactical arbitrage, setting their filters to, $5 profit, 50% ROI, 100 sales a month. So it's just not always going to be the case, unfortunately. Although there are opportunities like that out there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Search results will just be a little bit what we might be looking at if you're setting to there.
Right.
So what? So say you have a positive result, a positive conversation. Maybe a little bit. What does the follow up process look like? I know you said you want to schedule a Zoom, but what kind of things do you do? And what kind of schedule should you set as far as follow up goes?
Yeah, and so are we still talking ASD specific again?
No, either way.
In general.
Yeah, cold calling or whatever your other method might be.
Yeah, so I always say it depends on the conversation and really how it went. So it's like if I'm talking to, let's say, a brand and I get a hard no and they're just like, hey, no Amazon sellers right now, not open to it, whatever, then, and if the brand looks promising, right? If they're a good size, they're doing good volume, there's obviously that barrier to entry, and I think that I can work with them at some point, then I might follow up with them once a quarter or once a month or once every 2 months in perpetuity, really until they tell me like either, hey, stop calling, or, really there's not a whole lot they could say that unless it was just like, hey, stop calling. I would probably continue following up with them forever if I saw the opportunity. But if it's, let's say it's a distributor that, they're in a niche, but there's 10 other distributors that carry the same stuff that they carry. Well, if they shoot me down and say, hey, no Amazon sellers, or shoot me down for whatever reason, then, we might reach out every, 4 or 5 months just to see if they've changed their policy, but that's not one we're going to pursue as heavily because again, there's most likely 10 other suppliers that carry those same brands. So I think when it comes to follow-up consistency, it's just how promising does the lead look? And, what did the conversation look like too? Because if you had a good rapport with the person, but they said, hey, sorry, just timing's not good. Well, then I might check in every 2 weeks. In that case, if with that person specifically, if I had a good conversation. So it's really very much dependent on supplier type and conversation.
I like that. So let's shift gears just a touch and let's talk a little bit about your product selection. Are you looking to go wide? Are you looking to go deep, or do you want to do both? I guess what's your sourcing criteria look like?
Yeah, so definitely both. And our motto has always been like go wide to start, and then we always do at least one test order, and really 2, sometimes even 3 before we really go deep on a product. And as far as sourcing criteria, so we don't have a set in stone like, oh, we need to be netting X X number of dollars per unit for us to even look at it. Our whole thing is, look, we want to ideally net $250 per ASIN that we carry per month. And so if that means that we only sell 1 unit per month, but it's a $250 profit sale, well then great, that product works for us. And if it means we only make 50 cents a unit, but we sell 500 a month, as long as the gross margin is not, terrible, then that's one that we'll look at too. So that's why I just really try hard not to put constraints around what we're looking for, because the VAs are doing all the sourcing. And you guys know how typically if you give them like a hard constraint like that, even if you say, oh, well, there exceptions can be made, this and that, it's just sometimes it's not as easy to convey with them. So I try to keep it open-ended, because a lot of times they find stuff that might not be a good fit that ends up being great.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like inventory management, like what the length of time that you're willing to hold something, and then the amount of time before you decide to liquidate.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, inventory management is something, it's definitely not been our strong suit, and something that we've just been trying very hard to get better at. And like, in my opinion, that's the biggest lever for us as far as profitability and just increased sales, is getting better at inventory management. But as far as how long we're willing to hold a product for us, I mean, typically when we're buying, like, a test order is going to be anywhere from 2 weeks to 30 days worth of a product. And then once we decide we're going to go, I guess deeper on that product is like a regular product for us. So we're going to try to hold about 45 days worth of product. And so if anything has been sitting longer than 60 days within our repricer, then once a week when we're going over our repricer, we're like, all right, anything that's been sitting longer than 60 days, we start to liquidate. Now, that doesn't mean we start selling at a loss or even break even, but we change our settings to start to lower the price on that. And if something's been sitting, let's say 90 days or longer, then we are pretty much liquidating that at any cost and getting our money back and moving on.
That's perfect. So I'm going to ask a question that I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, and you've probably already kind of answered it. You said you're fully remote. So are you guys using prep centers or your own warehouse and employees in your operation?
So we're using a prep center currently. I guess our kind of progression was, when we first started in wholesale, we thought that we're only going to work with suppliers that ship directly to Amazon. Well, come to find out, that's not entirely realistic, but the first few that we worked with did do that. So really for the first 6 months or longer, we didn't have to get space because everyone was shipping to Amazon. Well, when we realized some suppliers wouldn't do that, we got a storage unit, and then we got 2 storage units, and then we got 3 storage units. And then we got a 2,000 square foot kind of like smaller warehouse condo type place. And I was managing 2 employees out of that, and very, very quickly found out that 1, that's not my strong suit. 2, I don't enjoy it. And 3, I just sucked at it. Like, we were losing money definitely because of having the warehouse. So, and we had bought that warehouse. So we actually ended up selling it and then outsourced to a 3PL. And it's like, as soon as we outsourced to the 3PL, we actually started to scale, because we were able just to double down on our core competency, which is sourcing, and just completely didn't have to worry about the logistics side.
Perfect. Hey, you're definitely not the only person that I've heard say this exact same thing. And I mean, I know some sellers who are, doing $20 million, $30 million a year, and switch to prep centers from having their own team. And they said that it was like the best decision that they ever made.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely not my strong suit either. So if I were to decide to pivot to wholesale, I know that it would be 100% prep center for me. So that's good to know.
Well, and because the way I see it, it's like, if you have your own warehouse, the whole goal of your warehouse is to not lose you money. Like, it's never going to make you money. So unless you're running it perfectly, then chances are it is losing money. And not only is it doing that, but you're having to spend so much time and so much effort just to keep it running smoothly. And I mean, it's basically a second business. And again, a second business that doesn't make you any money. So, I mean, to think that you're going to get, like, for example, Amazon Lit, their prep cost per ASIN, they said in Miami, is $1 per unit. And, all due respect to them, they're crushing it. But I pay less than $1 per unit for prep, and I don't have to deal with, 50 employees or 60 employees or however many they have to deal with. And I'm willing to make that trade every time. So that's why I just don't really see the appeal of the warehouse. And I think that was a limiting belief for me in the past, that, to do 8 figures or to really do big in this business, you've got to have a warehouse. Well, I'm seeing firsthand that's just simply not the case.
Yeah, and you don't have to bust one of your employees doing drugs in the bathroom, which
Right.
that's a real story. I know someone.
Your story?
No, it was not mine. I've had to fire people that did sourcing for me for being drunk on the job, stuff like that. But I know other people who've caught people doing like smoking meth in the bathroom at the warehouse.
Jeez.
Had to get rid of them. So
Probably a good prepper.
oh yeah, heck yeah, they were focused, they were fast. You just can't let them drive the forklift around.
Right.
I tell you, I'm a one-man operation, and I hate employees too. So I feel you there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about discounts. How or when do you ask for them, and then how do you kind of gauge on how to push for them, or push for more even?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess how we've started doing it is, and I get this question all the time. So like if it's a supplier that we just started working with for the first time and it's our first order with them, then typically we're not going to ask for a discount unless we're at least around like the 10K number on that first order. And so if we are, then typically I just go to them and like I try to ask for it in like a non-direct way. I send them or I guess we will send them the PO. And it won't say purchase order. It might say like draft or something, or we might even just send them like an email saying, hey, this is what we're thinking about ordering, or this is our tentative order. And it's just got SKU and then quantity. And then I'll just say, what's your best price? Or what can you do as far as pricing? And just ask it kind of open-ended like that, instead of, hey, can we have a discount? Or, hey, can we get 10% off or something like that? Just saying like, hey, what can you do for us here? And every time they will give you a better price, especially if the dollar amount is at that number a little higher. I mean, we will still do some like smaller orders from time to time. Maybe it's like one or two products that we're running low on, and because the subtotal is lower, we just won't ask for one. But yeah, and it definitely just comes with the relationship too. Like after a while, for example, one of our bigger tool and automotive suppliers, we don't have this rep anymore, unfortunately. But when we did, his whole thing was like, listen, just tell me the SKU that you want, and I will tell you just like the lowest price I can go. So just like know that the price I give you, like I simply can't go lower. So we got to the point where we were just like firing off a list of SKUs to him every couple of days, and he's like, I'm here on price, and then it's like, all right, two of those work, great. And then we were also able to say, for example, if they carried a certain brand, well, we were sending them SKUs that they didn't carry, but they had the ability to special order, and he would say, hey, we're here. And then, a lot of times we're able to do some additional orders that way. And again, those prices were discounted because we made it a point to say we're buying in volume, and the relationship was there too.
That's awesome. Two quick things out of there that just in case people missed. One, I see the question, how do I get discounts from suppliers all the time? And it seems like people want that on the front end. Like, arbitragers are used to being like, I'm going to use coupons. I'm going to, I'm going to do everything I can to get the lowest price possible. And they want to be able to do that up front. And in a relationship game, that's just not the way it is.
Right.
And then two, you dropped another category, which I think people should think about. When I talk to people, they're like, oh, hey, where can I find this kind of wholesaler? And after I tell them how to use Google, I'm like, well, everyone is asking for a grocery distributor or a beauty distributor, and that's it. And you just said tools and automotive, which is another place that I think is probably underutilized for people who are interested in wholesale. So yeah, that's a great one. I want to be respectful of your time. We've only got a couple more questions, so we're going to try to rapid fire through these as fast as we can.
Yeah, we're fine.
Can you share a little bit about what your day-to-day operation looks like? What are you doing? What is your team doing? And I guess, what do you want to get off your plate as well?
Yeah, so the day-to-day, so really as far as like the team structure is concerned, so right now, like the way I see, and we've got this kind of written out as far as our org chart. So at the top is me, right, over the operation, and my goal and my role is primarily to close new accounts, right? So whether those be brand direct accounts, new distributor accounts, really just high level trying to close new suppliers, and then also networking, because that has by far been the highest ROI thing I've done in any aspect of business, hands down. And then also just like brand building, now that I'm kind of doing the Twitter thing, the YouTube thing, really just getting myself out there has brought a lot more opportunities. So I'd say those three tasks are like my responsibility. And my goal is to get it to where my entire day is focused on only those 3 things. And I'm not quite there yet, but that's the goal. And then, so under me, like the seat under me would be like operations manager. And so right now my head VA is in that operations manager role, but she's also in the buyer role. So I see operations manager as essentially being the one that manages the VAs. And so she's doing that management, but she's also my head buyer as well. And so the head buyer, essentially I have 2 sourcing VAs, and those 2 sourcing VAs are feeding leads to my buyer. And so let's say the sourcing VAs find 10 new ASINs this week for us to buy. Well, then my buyer is taking that list of 10, and maybe she's saying, okay, we're actually only going to buy these 7, right? So she's kind of filtering that down to the ones that we actually want to buy. And so she's putting together a PO for those 7. And once a week, every Wednesday, we have our buyer call where we sit down and we look at, all right, what are all the orders that we're going to place this week, like for like test orders, so like any new products that we're going to buy, and then what are we going to reorder based on whatever's been selling well profitably that we're running low on. And so that's kind of like the buyer's whole role is to just tee up as many orders as possible for stuff that we're testing out and for stuff that we need to reorder. And then we've got an admin who right now he's only 4 hours a day, but his whole job is to take care of all the software management, the spreadsheet management, the email, the calendar, all of that, anything that just doesn't move the needle. And that does, he's basically got to make sure the buyer stays buying and that I stay focused on that higher level stuff. And then, so we brought on kind of an executive assistant. She's starting on Monday actually, where she's actually going to be taking over like my email, my schedule, all my personal tasks, like anything that, I would do just personally. To keep kind of the admin freed up to really just focus on the Amazon side. It's like the executive assistant's not going to be doing anything Amazon related. The admin's just fully like Amazon admin related. But yeah, so I mean, I guess that's really the day to day is like the 2 sourcing VAs are 8 hours a day feeding leads to my buyer. The buyer's putting together orders. Typically I'm sitting down with the buyer and the sourcing team members too, because it helps them learn. And we're going through line by line, like, all right, we're going to order this. Like, she basically proposes a PO and I say like, yes, 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 or no, let's change the quantity here, or no, we're not going to buy this product and this is why. So like the whole thing is really like a teaching or like a coaching thing. And so the goal is to get the buyer to where she's autonomously able to pull the trigger on certain orders or like orders up to a certain dollar amount, right? Where I don't need to give her approval, but every week we're going to review it to make sure that she made the right choice. And the goal is to kind of like slowly inch her up. And I mean, really she's there. Like, I think I could let her pull the trigger on orders up to like a couple grand maybe, but I want to just be abundantly clear before I hand that off. So I'd say that's another one of my day-to-day tasks too, is just like trying to review orders with her, because that's how she learns. And really that's how we make more money, is just buying more.
Mm-hmm. So I've got 2 follow-ups for that. How long did it take you to get her to that level of competency?
So she's I guess the most tenured VA that I have currently. So she started with me in November of 2019. So she was brand new to Amazon at the time. So like everything she's learned from scratch. But as far as like her being in the actual buyer role, I'd say it's been over the last probably like 9 months to a year. I've started to really like try to get her more comfortable with, hey, like how many would you order in this case, right? Instead of just saying, hey, we need to order 48. Like just and it was a slow process of like trying to transfer decision-making authority and like just trying to think critically about that stuff to her. And so if I were to go back and like actually say like, all right, the goal is to get you in this role, then it probably could have done it sooner. But really I'd say at least a year of like focused effort on like getting her good at this specific task.
Awesome. Now the second follow-up to that is, what are the important metrics and KPIs that you pay attention to every day or week in your business and with your team?
Yeah. So here, let me pull up my sheet. So every Wednesday morning we have like just basically we call it our weekly team call, where it's like less than 15 minutes. We go over our KPIs for the week, like our company KPIs, and then we go over the individual KPIs as well. And so the KPIs we track on a company level are just weekly revenue, number of ASINs shipped, Then we cover the percent coverage of our top ASINs. And so what that means, and that's like the buyer's number one KPIs. And what that means is, so of our top 30 ASINs, we want to have at least 80% of them in stock at all times, because we know we're realistically never going to be able to have 100% of them in stock because of supply issues or whatever. But if we can keep 80% of our top products in stock at all times, then we will be perfectly fine. And like, transparency, I don't think we've ever even been close to having 80% in stock at all times. Yet we've had really good months. So it's like, if we can just get to 80%, then we could be in a really good spot. So like, that's her primary KPI that she's held accountable for. And then we've got, and these are more so like, I guess these aren't like, lead measures, but just, again, stuff we're tracking. So it's like number of active FBA ASINs, number of new SKUs purchased that week. So, how many new SKUs are we test ordering this week? Because that way we can say, like, all right, if we on average are testing 5 new SKUs a week, then we know that of those 5, we're typically going to replenish, 1 to 2 or something, like, for example. So just having that metric to be able to look back. Then we're looking at, so our percentage of our freight shipments picked up on time, because that's one of the admin's primary KPIs, is that if we schedule a freight pickup, it's got to be picked up on time, because every day that spends not being checked out at Amazon is we're losing money by the day. And then we've got our invoiced dollar amount spend that week. So it's like, not just how much did we order in total, but how much did we actually pay for, because that way we know how much is actually shipping this week to our 3PL. And then we've got just accounts payable, and it's just, I just want to know at all times, like, how much do we owe? So that way we just don't get over leveraged. And then we track our total spend for that week. So not only what do we get invoiced for this week, but what do we order in total, whether that be back orders or, pre-orders or whatever. So that's the difference between that and then the invoice spend. And then the sourcing team KPIs are just number of new SKUs approved for that week. How much spend did that VA generate that week? And then what is the expected gross margin from that spend by VA, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, that does. And I'll tell you what, I really love that, because I think that some people try to make this too complicated. And I feel like what you have set up it's something I could explain to my 9-year-old. He may not totally get it, but I could at least take it and say, hey, listen, here's what Corey shared with me. And I could, explain that to him, which is, honestly, that's what we need to do with business. We need to make it as simple as possible. Now, I lied. There are a couple more follow-up questions here. So
yeah, you're fine. No, you're good.
How often are you using like net terms in your business, and what is your, I guess, are you using, Amazon loans? Are you using credit cards, or do you have a mix of all of these things? I guess, what works best for you?
Yeah, definitely a mix. And so we have net terms with a few suppliers. Now, I'd say with all of our biggest ones, we don't have net terms, only because those suppliers just happen to have a policy that they don't extend terms to e-commerce retailers, because they've been burned in the past. So that's something where we do try to revisit that every 3 to 6 months, and we haven't had any luck yet, but I do think we can work that out with them. But so, like, we're buying on terms from a couple suppliers, not really our main ones, but it helps, right, wherever you can get it. And then, I mean, but everything we're buying is on a credit card. So even if we're buying on terms, and even if they're requiring us to pay with cash, I know we've discussed this tip before, where we're using a service called Melio, where we pay with credit card, but the vendor gets paid in cash. And so we just have to pay a 2.9% fee for that. So we're always using a credit card. We've got, I guess the way we're structured is like each like bucket of our finances has its own credit card. So like inventory has its own bank account and its own credit card. OpEx has its own credit card and its own bank account. Freight and 3PL fees have their own bank account and their own credit card. So everything's on credit cards and everything's paid through that specific bank account. And that's because we follow profit first. And so that just makes things a lot easier. Okay. But as far as like actual physical paying for the goods, it's a credit card, net terms, or we have a line of credit with our bank that we tap into as well. And so I guess how we approach that is, every 2 weeks when we get paid out by Amazon, when we're making our when we're basically replenishing each bucket based on the profit first model, we don't put any money into the profit bucket if there's a balance on the credit line. So like right now, I think our balance on the credit line is like 57K or something. So it's like we're not taking any profit until that's paid off. That's kind of how we approach it, because our goal is to just really be not in debt like whenever possible. Mm-hmm. And always paying the credit cards off in full every month, and that's never an issue or anything.
Awesome.
Nice. So I'm curious, is it better to look for companies that are well-known brands, or are there advantages to smaller niches, or even how do you choose between those options?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking to sell big brand name products, like for example, maybe like Bayer or Head and Shoulders or Listerine or some of these brands, like you're gonna have to buy them through distribution. So targeting just big distributors or regional distributors or even mom and pop distributors that carry brands like that is going to be how you get access to brands like that. Now, when it comes to these smaller, more niche brands, or maybe they're in like a smaller category, then a lot of the times you will have success going directly to the manufacturer and trying to open a wholesale account with them. Sometimes even if they're a smaller brand, they might push you to one of their distributors, which in that case is fine. But that's kind of how I would approach it, depending on like if you're trying to determine who should I reach out to based on like what I want to sell.
Interesting.
I like that. All right, we should probably wrap this up. We're a little over the promised timeline here, but I want people to be able to find you. Where is the best place to follow you, reach out, anything that you want to share with folks before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so definitely the easiest way to engage with me would just be on Twitter. And so it's just at my last name, first name. So at Ganem Corey. And that's G-A-N as in Nancy, I-M as in Mary, Corey. And on YouTube, I'm just at Corey Ganem. And so Twitter would be a lot easier if I was at Corey Ganem too. Some girl in Indiana that hasn't tweeted since 2012 has at Corey Ganem. So maybe Elon can help me out there. We can figure something out.
Right. Oh, perfect. And I'll make sure links to both YouTube and Twitter are down below the show. Whether you're listening on YouTube or you're over on your favorite podcast player, I'll make sure there are some easy links to get to there. Dude, this was fantastic. I think this answered a ton of questions that people are interested in, or maybe even fearful of when they want to at least add wholesale to their sourcing tool belt. And I think this is going to be extremely helpful. So I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us and talk about this, man.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I love doing stuff like this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, that's it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week with another episode, hopefully nearly as good as this one. But until then, guys, good selling, stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.